Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mike Ames Recruitment Show, where as you can see we're going to be talking about a case study of an MBO and running a rec firm without commission. So essentially it's how to successfully do an MBO, and part of that is a sticky employer. Now to do that we have a fantastic guest who Mike is going to introduce in just a second, but before then I have to mention him. How are you doing today, Mike?
Well, I'm at the coast. As you can see, it's a little different there. I've got to show you this. Check this out. Right, that's the view from my office today. That is the
angry.
Right there. So
angry.
If I was any better, I'd be twins. I'm really good. Thank you, Kirsty.
Okay, and can you introduce Alan today and why we've had him on the show?
Yes. Well, welcome, Alan. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hello. Thank you.
Okay, so I've been discussing various things with Alan. And one of the things that I was very interested in was that he was part of an MBO team, a team that took over ownership of the business from the original owner. And just talking about that with him is just an interesting thing, because the majority of recruitment business never end in a trade sale or any kind of sale, really. They tend to peter out is normally what happens to them. Or sometimes they'll merge with another firm. But an MBO is a very, very real exit route that anybody can take, but there are some lessons to be learned. And just talking to Alan, he's obviously learned those lessons. So one of them, which I know we're going to talk about a little later, is if you're thinking of an MBO, start years in advance. And that's really what we wanted to do today. So even if you're nowhere near an exit, at least you can begin to think about the right kind of things and make the right kind of decisions early on. And then secondly, we really wanted to talk about becoming a sticky employer, because a key part of an MBO is to have a good quality team behind you. And to do that, you've got to have very low attrition rates, which Alan's firm does, about 3%, I think, between 3 and 5%. So really what we're interested in is how he does that and have a discussion around that. So plenty to talk about. But to introduce Alan properly, he's the director of Scotland Contract. And what Scotland Contract that was a trick to see if you were listening. Contract Scotland, there you go. Is I'm old, hashtag senior moment, is they provide contract and perm white collar workers in the construction and property field. So lots to go up there. So welcome again, Alan, and many apologies about the name. Should I go and stand in the corner over there?
It's just an embarrassment, isn't it?
Whatever. I don't care. Come on.
It's just an embarrassment. Okay, right now. As we go through, Alan is here. Alan's happy to answer questions. Some things, as I'm sure you guys are more than obvious, he's probably not going to go into deep things in certain areas, which is fine. But feel free to ask the questions and I'll bring them up to Alan. But Alan, the first thing that we wanted to go through was sort of the process of the MBO, because it's something that I think a lot of people have no idea around. So can you, if you possible, can you sort of take us from the beginning? Like, when was an MBO first sort of put in front of you as an option?
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned to a couple of people, I think that, this is something that, an MBO has different sides to it, I suppose, primarily the sort of seller and the buyers. And I can obviously bring my perspective to this from the buyer's side, if you will, from that MBO team that we're looking to take the business on. But it is something certainly that as Mike mentioned, is years in the making, whether it's called an MBO or whatever else. The idea that there might be an opportunity to be part of an ownership team or have part of the business and to take that type of role is something that I think a seed is often planted a long time in advance, and there might be no meaningful discussions on that for a long time, but it takes time, and that's something that you can, as an individual, or certainly I could as an individual, I could attach myself to as a long-term.
Can I ask a question on that, Alan? So I don't know whether you remember the exact moment that the original owner said, "Hey guys, I'm thinking of maybe doing this. Would you be up for it?" But from that point onwards, and it became kind of real, did that change your attitude and the way you felt about the business?
Yeah, I think we'll talk a bit about our kind of our purpose and stuff, if you will, but it just cemented that, what I can remember, because you're going back to a period where we were probably 25% of the size that we are now. But what I recall was the original founder talking about his views on a trade sale, and a trade sale not being something that he ever really wanted to do. And if he didn't want to do a trade sale, well, what were the alternatives for him, and the desire to grow a team of people who in future could take the business on and lead it.
I think that's a key point there that you brought out, is that the last thing you should do is decide like now that next year you'll do an MBO if you're the owner. It takes many years to actually cultivate the team, doesn't it? To form the team so that you can dip out and the thing still works well, and it still continues to grow and develop itself. So what kind of things did he do with you? Can you remember the sort of things that he did to try and position you to take over the business?
Yeah, and you know, how much of that was by design and how much of that was by accident, I guess you'd have to ask him. But I think responsibility and opportunity and exposure to new things, and some of that stuff will come up in a discussion we might have about being a sticky employer and what that means for our team now. But it was about ultimately, in the end, in the few years prior to the MBO completing, it was about us running the business in his absence. You know, he was around, he was occasionally available, but he was much less present, and so it was us doing that, albeit with not ultimate accountability and ownership, but running the business.
Did he give you certain dashboards or reports or some kind of targets or data or KPIs or something that he knew what was going on in the business without physically being in it?
Oh, he definitely knew what was going on in the business without physically being in it, but maybe less dashboards and KPIs and things. You know, the founder, you know, knew what his metrics were as to success or otherwise, but I wouldn't pretend for a second he didn't know what was going on in the business. We might have been running it, but he knew what was happening. But you were right in what you say about, I think, you know, in that MBO team being put together. Again, I only have my own personal experience to go on here, but I suspect that if you took 100 owners and who said they wanted to go down an MBO process and asked them who their initial MBO team is going to be, who is the management team that's going to be part of that initial buyout, I suspect half of those teams don't end up being the exact team that go through the MBO process. You know, I think there's obvious plans there, but an MBO process will affect that and will change that as you go through.
It's funny you say that, because I obviously took a different route. There were similarities with both my businesses that we built, but at some point we said to the senior team, look, we're going to sell the business. By then they had shares and we were issuing shares, so they knew what was coming anyway. But the point was, rather than make them feel uneasy or awkward about what was going on, was to give them real purpose. And the management team that we had, we took all the way through, and then post the business after I left, they ran it for a time. But the interesting thing, and the reason I mention this, is had I been doing an MBO, I probably would have looked at that team differently. In fact, I would have looked at that team differently, because as with a sale, you're still there after the sale because it's part of the earn out. Well, you should be really looking after your interests. So it doesn't matter if things don't work out, I'm going to sort that out. But with an MBO, that's not quite the same, is it? There are differences in terms of how it works. You have to pick a good team to manage that business moving forward. You have to get it right. And I wonder, you know, with yours, without giving away kind of that many, well, any kind of confidences, but did he kind of steer the team, maybe moving people aside, or did he kind of manipulate the team to what he wanted?
I certainly think he had a hand in that. I certainly think he had, but again, this is something that probably he would be best placed to answer. But from my perspective and from what I saw as part of that process, you know, he had a hand in that. But then naturally, that process and the discussions that happen to successfully complete an MBO, there's some tough discussions in there, right? And you will have hard discussions with people that you've worked for years and enjoy working with and like as people, but it will make you have conversations that perhaps as a management team you haven't had before. So
I was going to ask you about that as well. Did the team itself, when they realized the MBO was becoming real, did the team itself start to question or challenge each other to make sure that these are the guys I want to be on the boat with, you know, when we're cut loose?
I think you do that naturally, don't you? I think you know, I likened it to, so our MBO went through in 2021, and that just so happens to be the year I got married as well. And I likened it to that I made 2 commitments that year. You know, I had 2 separate marriages, because the business one, you are choosing to commit yourself alongside other partners for a period of time, you know. So you are, I'm not saying you don't do that in employment, you might think like that, but I think in employment, most people think more short term, perhaps over a 2-3 year period at most, rather than necessarily thinking about 5-10 years, which as part of an MBO, naturally you will do.
Okay, just a couple of questions around this. I know we need to move on to other things, but if you're thinking of conditions, whether you're a buyer or a seller, what needs to be true to consider an MBO? I'm guessing that the business has to be in good shape. You wouldn't really MBO a losing business, would you? A business that was going down the slippery slope. It has to be at least steady, or preferably going forward. And it does have to have those people capable of taking it forward. Is there anything else you think that was relevant at the time when you took that decision to sign on the dotted line?
You definitely, you know, it has to be something you still believe in for the longer term. So yes, it has to be successful, but you know, again, speaking for myself, I can't speak for my other 2 partners in the MBO. You know, the reason and there were multiple reasons, but one of the reasons I committed myself to it is that it's the same business that I believed in for 15 years prior to that process. You know, so the philosophy and the belief behind the business is one that I bought into then and still buy into. So successful or not, it was a purpose that I wanted to take forward. So I think you're right, though, about the fact that ultimately, the conditions wise, yes, if we had a willing buyer and a willing seller, which helps, right? Because you had 2 groups of people who wanted to make this work, and I'm sure in other situations it might not be quite as clean as that, but in our situation, as a group and as a business, it allowed us to not change the book, right? This is still the same book.
Yeah.
But we're on to a new chapter of that book, and changing some things and putting our own stamp on it and doing things that previously might not have been possible, but with the same underlying book, if you will.
I think as an owner, when you consider this, for some people that's very important. So when we sold the first business, Modis, who bought it, made it quite clear that they would just merge it in with all the other businesses that they had in the UK. So Software Knowledge would disappear, which it did within 2 years. With the second business, Harvey Nash made it clear the exact opposite was going to happen. They were going to keep Crimson, a bit like your business in a sense, Contract Scotland, to keep your business as a whole. So Crimson still exists, it just says at the bottom of it, a Harvey Nash company. And I think if you want your business to continue running it, then an MBO is probably a safer bet for that than selling it to somebody, particularly if it's a big sale, because they'll do with it what they want, really, you know. So I was just interested, the owner the guy that you bought it from, was that one of his motives, do you think, when he sold the business in MBO?
100%. I think he was quite vocal about not wanting to sell his business, and then walk down the street and somebody said to him, what the heck happened to Contract Scotland? I think from a legacy perspective, as well as wanting to see the people who'd helped him build the business and grown up in here take it forward, I think he also wanted to make sure that the whole reason he founded the business in 1990 and the whole reason we exist didn't suddenly change just for the sake of a few quid.
Yeah, at one point an MBO, and I'm not going to ask you obviously the details of your deal, but at one point an MBO was a cheap deal, right? You wouldn't get as much in an MBO as you would get in a trade sale. Okay, so I mean, there are very, very few floats in the recruitment industry, but there's quite a few trade sales in comparison to MBO. So, but now I'm led to believe that actually they're kind of on parity, really. So obviously there are differences if it's an MBO, and we're going to talk about this in a second, how you get your money, but with a corporate sale, you get a big chunk up front between 60 and 80%, and then the rest is part of an earnout usually. But with an MBO, it normally is kind of paid off. You can take a loan, I know, but normally it's paid off from the profits moving forward. So I'd like to talk about that really for a second with you, because with an MBO, there are 3 really big questions. Who? Well, you've talked about that one. Okay. How much and how long? So could you do, without giving us obviously information, details or something, could you talk us through that valuation piece, and then the agreement as to the kind of the how you would agree to pay that off to the owner?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as much as I possibly can. I mean, our valuation piece, it was the seller. The seller decided how much he felt the business was worth, and it was a fair valuation. And how he chose to value the business is probably his business, but it was something that we were all happy with and felt was a fair valuation. And then you're right in the context of, unlike a trade sale, which I've never been part of, you know much more about that than myself, Mike. Obviously, it you know, that then the relationship with that individual, the seller and the buyers, then continues for a number of years.
It does. With the trade sale, you know, 1 minute your bank balance looks like that, and then the next day it looks like that, which is a difference, I suppose. You don't get that in an MBO. Well, you can actually. I mean, you can take a loan. I know people do that, but if you're going to write it off over a long period of time, there's something maybe like an EOT, an employee ownership trust, could be something you should look at, because it's capital gains tax free. But there are some downsides to it, so it's not perfect for everybody. And I know that you didn't use an EOT for the way in which you ran things, which is obvious the way in which you're talking. But I think that the idea that if you've got a team that you trust, if it's a profitable business, if you've been running with that team for some time, there's no reason why they should suddenly change direction. And if you want your business to continue, valuation isn't that difficult, because you could just use a valuation of 5 times by the profit. I mean, that's the loosest you can do. Now, I never get these the right way around. That then is the EQ, equitable value, but then there's the EV when you've made all the adjustments. I think it's that way around. But in any event, there are two, and I agree that it is down to the buyer, because the seller won't sell it unless they get the money that they want. But also, as buyers, you would not have taken that on if you'd not felt that that was a comfortable valuation based upon. Did you do research on what firms were kind of going for?
No.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough.
Well, I certainly didn't. Again, I can't speak for the two other partners. We had a figure, and we worked to that figure, and the figure felt fair for everybody. You know, and bear in mind, we completed this in the midst of a pandemic, right? So if we weren't sure about the purpose of, if we weren't sure about the business, and we weren't sure as where we wanted to head to or the valuation, then it would be a funny time to complete that kind of.
In that year, I think only 47 businesses changed hands, which isn't very many, really. So yeah, you're one of a very small club. But I think, I know we're coming to the end of this section.
I do want to move on in a minute, Mike. So just
but just this one last point around this valuation piece. I think as well, if you want it to be uber fair, then having someone to come in and value the business, which you have to do if you go down the EOT, you have to have an independent valuation. That's just the rules. I think the same, having someone who's not being paid for by either side to come in and say, well, okay, based on what I know about valuations of recruitment firms, it's around this. And then you've got an anchor point in which to negotiate backwards and forwards, because there are other factors, of course. Yeah. One of which, I remember a lovely story, which I'll cut down to the bare minimum. 2 brothers were selling a driving firm, a haulage firm, and they said, we want 20 million for it. And the buyer said, well, where'd you get that figure from? Oh, because he wants 10 million and I want 10 million, so it's 20 million. And even though during due diligence they knocked it down to like 17 million, look, we've proved that it's only worth 17. Yeah, I know, but we want 20 million for it. That's the price, because he wants 10 million and I want 10 million. So sometimes the desires of the seller override everything else. You just have to think, well, are we going to do it or not? And you obviously did. But I do think getting a valuation is probably the better thing to do if you can.
Okay. There's another nodding and agreeing there. So I think that works out. Okay, so we are kind of coming to the end of this. And Alan, there's something that you kind of alluded to and mentioned a lot of times throughout what we just spoke about, which is essentially the founder had a team of people who were stable, who believed in what he believed in, and we're going to delve deeper into that in a second. But before then, Mike, now is a time for a word from our sponsor.
Yeah, that's us, isn't it, really?
It is us, yeah.
Okay, let's do that then. Okay, so we run Profit and Lifestyle Growth Summits. They're one-day summits in a hotel or a conference centre, and they're for 2 types of people. They're recruitment company owners who are ready to go to the next level. Businesses transition as they grow. They don't just grow in a smooth way. They transition, and they're different transition points. They've reached the point of transition and they want a map of the maze, and we give them that. Or people who own businesses who are frustrated, overwhelmed, and disappointed because the business has not turned out how they expected it to do. And they're looking for clarity and confidence as to how to move that business forward. Now, the growth summits themselves are a full day session. We work on 5 things. Strategic BD, which is crucial if you want to grow your business and win high value clients. To become an apex client carer, which means that you're at the top of the tree, and there are some specific things you can do to achieve that. A zero cost marketing engine, which is the best kind of marketing engine if you ask me. Layered fulfillment as opposed to 360, but you can have blended, you can have a mix of the two. And then finally, as we're going to talk about in a second or two, how to become a sticky employer, because sticky employers make more profit. Now, the good part is the costs are very reasonable. You get lunch and breakfast for that. In fact, in Birmingham, you can barely get a good lunch for 97 quid these days. So if you're interested and you would like to know more, we'll send you a link. If you email summit to mike@flair.co.uk or reach out through LinkedIn to me, and I will happily send you that link. Okay, Kirsty, over to you.
Fantastic. Now, as Mike mentioned, we are big fans of Sticky Employer. And Alan, there are a couple of things that Mike alluded to. I know we're going to go into this zero commission piece, which I know we're going to come to in a second. But before then, how important do you think a stable team is for a recruitment company?
I think it is absolutely essential, and I think it's a thing that recruitment as an industry is pretty bad at, actually. Depending on who you believe and which statistics you want to read, I think, anywhere between, I said 20 and 47%. I think Mike, I said 60% of sort of attrition rates per year in recruitment, which I think does our industry a disservice, and it's something that much more businesses should be focused on.
I think that's 100% right. Stability. I tell you what stability gives you, several things really. First of all, people can become productive, uber productive, because they're doing the same thing in the same place. They're doing it and they get better and better. As soon as you chop and change a team, move people out or move people in, those people are never at maximum productivity. And in some cases, they reach productivity and then they go, or they're promoted to a role in which they're a trainee all of a sudden, and they're no longer at maximum productivity. So if you want a team to be uber productive, and when I say productive, ladies and gentlemen, I mean profitable. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Let's be clear, right? If you want it to be uber profitable, then you need it to be stable. The second thing, there is that whole being greater than some of its parts. When you get a team that really meshes, they get to know each other and begin, and they're kind of in the friend zone a little bit. So you do extra things for people that you care about, then that suddenly just blows your profit through the roof. And I think those two things added together are firm reasons why it's important to have a stable team. But can I ask you though, Alan, if you don't mind, why do you think recruitment does have such a high attrition rate? What are the things that sit behind that?
I think the first point is hiring the wrong people from the beginning, which is crazy, I think, to say from a recruitment perspective. But I suspect that a lot of recruitment businesses hire on the wrong things initially, and rather than focusing on whether the individuals they're hiring fit their sort of belief system and philosophies and think it should be done in the same way they do, they probably hire based on, to use your phrase, rather than money, productivity. I think they probably hire based on past sales performance and how much money can this person make me, rather than is this person the right person for me? Will they fit the team? Are they on the same page as us?
I think there's something else about that as well. That hiring piece is that recruiters tend to be quite reactive hirers. Yeah. You talk to them, yeah, we're going to take on 5 people this year or whatever. That's fine. But suddenly they make a decision, they want someone. So they have to go to the Rec-to-Recs. And of course, the Rec-to-Recs can't magic people from somewhere, that they only are what they are. And I think that half the problem is they take what they can get, not necessarily what they need or what they want, but we've got no one, we've got so much work, we need to deal with this, or so-and-so has left and we need to replace so-and-so. and rather than sort of hang it out for a bit longer, they just take who they can get. Now, we believe in a thing called refrigerator recruitment. It's something that I did in the early years, and in fact all the way through Software Knowledge, was I would go and see people just for a coffee or a drink in those days. Actually, why am I kidding myself? It wasn't a coffee. We went for beers, right? And I would just talk about the business. No job. There's no job. I just want to see whether the way in which you see the recruitment world is the way that I see it. And sometimes it'd be 1 or 2, maybe even 3 times with me. But I would know at the end of that period whether that person fitted the mold that Software Knowledge was, the culture that we had. I would know, and I was rarely wrong. I mean, sometimes I did make mistakes, but rarely wrong. And that could take months. And then when I was sure, which is just a waiting game then, which is why it's called the refrigerator recruitment, because then you open the fridge when you're ready and you take someone out who's ready to be pulled out of the fridge. And I think it's the exact opposite. But what it really is a sort of a pipeline, in the same way that you would have a pipeline for clients, moving them through to become closer and closer to be a client. It's the same. You're getting people that are closer and closer to becoming employees. But when you take them on, you know exactly what you're buying. And you're buying the best that you can get at that time. And I think that my advice around this would always be the same, is to try and think about your hiring strategy, not in terms of a goal, I've got to take on 5 people this year. It's, okay, I'm going to develop a pipeline of people, and gradually I'll bring in the right people for the firm, and they will stay longer and work harder for you if you do that. How close is that to the sort of method that you use, Alan?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's probably pretty close. If you were to, so the majority of the team here, when we hired them, and I include myself in this, I joined Contract Scotland having done no recruitment. Right, I'd never done recruitment before. I had never worked in the construction, engineering, and property industry before, so I joined knowing very little, right? And the majority of the team here are similar, but certainly my 2 other partners in the MBO as well, I think neither of them had worked in recruitment before. So we started off here and learned, but we started off here because we were the right people with the right attitude, the right philosophies, and the business, we grew with the business from there. Which, that's not to say we don't hire people with existing recruitment experience, because sometimes that clearly does happen. But I suspect if you spoke to the people that have joined the business with that experience, they would tell you that they knew who we were beforehand, that they knew a bit about what we were about, that they'd heard things about us, they might have come across us at events and things like that. You know, and we are not a national UK brand and a PLC or anything, but just by virtue of reputation and being networked and things, I think people had a feeling of what we were about before they came.
Did the boss, the guy that was running it at the time, did he hire people and then realize that there was a mismatch on culture, and then did he act appropriately around that?
No, I think it's probably the opposite. I think he hired people and realized that he could hire people who he could teach recruitment to and could teach construction, engineering, and property to, and if they were the right people from the beginning, that the other stuff was teachable, and that would develop those individuals rather than a lesson the other way, I think.
I'm interested in this because they say you can't teach attitude and work ethic. And I think sometimes people's commitment to a company is in response to how that person is treated by the company. I do see that occasionally, but broadly speaking, I think a work ethic is important. We always used to ask, well, can you tell me about your Saturday job, right? Because if you didn't have one, you probably haven't got the right work ethic for us. Not that I would say that, of course, but I'm just interested to know what you did, because most good workers that I know started work really early on. They got a good work ethic. Those people that didn't necessarily mean they didn't have the right work ethic, but that was a big red flag for me. In terms of the people that you had, though, clearly the guy that ran it was trying to hire not identikit people, because there's no value in that. That's a terrible thing to do. But hiring that, I think you said, that philosophy and the shared mission. How did he know that when he interviewed you? How did he kind of know that? How would you have found that out about you, that you were a match for his business?
I think it's probably away from recruitment, right? I try and think about how I would do it now, and it's not necessarily about, and sometimes it is, I will ask non-recruitment people recruitment scenario type questions, not to expect them to know how to deal with it, but just to see from a human perspective how they might approach it, because I think that tells me a lot about them as a as an individual and about how they think and about how they would try and solve the problem, and how that matches up to who we are as a group of people.
I think it's very important to think about the questions that you would ask, you know.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Did you tell me about your Saturday job? It's a silly thing, really, but just tell me something, really. In the same way, when I say, tell me about something that you failed at, I'm really interested in what you learned from that. Some people just aren't prepared to open up about that. They just don't see failure as the thing that they can accept. And either in their heads they've never failed. Well, I don't want you then, do I? I want people that are prepared to push the boundaries a little bit. Or those people that seem a little bit slapdash about failure. You know, we don't want those either. We want people that, this is what happened, this is what I did, and this is what I learned. So these kind of questions that you would design for yourself, I mean, I'm not saying you copy my questions, but do you have those questions, or do you have things that you would sort of steer the conversation down to get the results from?
Yeah, so there's sort of 6 or 7 things which I'll not go into just now, but there are 6 or 7 things that, you know, if we were looking to hire a recruitment consultant who'd never necessarily worked in recruitment before, that we would be looking for certain attributes, and we would know how to drill in to see those. And that could be things as simple as initiative. You know, have they been able to show initiative somewhere? Achievement, willingness to succeed at something. So, you know, your Saturday job example, Mike, or, you know, outside of a qualification or something, have they shown a desire to get involved in things, and are they inquisitive, and all these kind of things. The natural things that we, you know, have looked at our team and looked at what has made us successful as individuals in the past. And as you said, terrible idea to have just a lack of diversity of thought and just have one identikit person, but trying to look at what has made people successful in the past. What are the personal attributes rather than...
In this business, that's the key thing to say, because just because they've been successful somewhere else doesn't mean to say they'll come here, or vice versa. So it is important to understand your philosophy, your mission, and get someone to buy into that mission, because if you don't come here. And I was very plain on that. If you don't like the way in which I'm telling you that we run, don't come, because if you do, you'll be out at some point pretty short afterwards. Because
I have a question for you, actually, Alan. Obviously, you had the founder. I think you said that your partners that you currently are with, they came up through the business, through the organization, the same way that you did. Do you think because of that, because you were all kind of in this space, your founder sounds like the kind of person who had a real big ideas on this, that the mission, the philosophy was really important. Now that you're co-owners, like in this space together, do you think that makes it easier to keep the business with those same morals, that because all three of you have the same ones? You know what I mean? That's a really weird way to answer that question.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a good thing. 90% a good thing that all three of us grew up in here and have such a strong belief about what we do and why we do it, because it just embodies everything we do, and our day-to-day actions and the decisions we make about the business or the team or whatever. It flows through everything. The 10% is that it's also, we need to get other people involved in the business and have counsel elsewhere, because you need that diversity of thought and you need other input with different perspectives that perhaps we don't have because we grew up in this one business. So you have to supplement that with other things.
And of course, recruitment is a changing landscape. It's not standing still, that's for damn sure. Now, can I come on to this curious zero commission thing? Because in the first business I had, we didn't pay traditional commission in that way. It was more of a bonus scheme, and then there was a share option scheme, and there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, really. But we paid enough every month that people could live, that proper wage, so you could pay your mortgage, put food on the table, book your holidays and things of that nature. And what we paid as a conditional element to it was just a real nice to have every quarter that people got. Now you run a similar kind of thing, I think, and I'd like to, without giving away anything that you don't want to share, of course, but I'd like to expand upon that a little bit and why that's the case and what it looks like and the effect that has had on the business, especially the attrition rates. Because just to finish this off, because you'd think if people aren't paying commission, you're going to lose everybody because they're going to go everywhere else to get this mythical commission, and clearly that doesn't happen with you. So could you expand on that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, some people will, because if they are the wrong people from the beginning, or if what they're interested in is to work on a commission and have it directly linked to every placement they make equals X amount of money. This just isn't the right place for those people, right? And that's just a fact, because that's not what we believe in and how we want to approach it. I mean, the philosophy of that, and this business has been structured pretty much the same way, certainly well before my time, was the original founder worked for a major international recruitment agency who everybody will know, but I'll leave unnamed, and potentially the most high volume, don't care about the quality of what you do, just get the numbers on the board and you'll earn good money for doing it, and we want more and we want more and we want more. And he saw what that did to the quality of recruitment and the people and what worked and what didn't work, and felt that it was way too focused on quantity over quality, and actually he felt that careers and jobs in recruitment was too important to be treated like an out and out Hoover salesman, for want of a better phrase. So that's what led us to a no commission structure, one in which that you'll have to trust me, when things are going well and the business is going well, we operate under a transparent profit share scheme. So the business retains a fixed amount of profit, and there's a metric behind that the whole team here see and know. So it's not just Alan Shave as a director keeps a piece of paper in the background and tells people once in a while what that means. It's a transparent profit share scheme, but that is not directly linked to how many placements you make. It's based upon a much more qualitative assessment of what you do, how it fits with the things that are important to us, what we call delivery benchmarks.
Your values too, presumably. Your values come into that as well, do they?
Yeah, it flows throughout the whole thing. But it's, and some of it's as simple as the things that, if you went and asked 100 candidates what annoys them most about recruitment agencies, I'm sure 100 of them would probably say, oh, they never respond to my application, right? So, one of our delivery benchmarks is as simple as, have we responded to all applications within a certain time frame? And that sounds like a really obvious, simple thing, but it's important to us. It's because of what we believe and what we believe recruitment can be and what it can do to respond to people who take the effort and apply to jobs.
So just to sum up on this, so there is a conditional part to what people get, some sort of bonusy thing that goes on, presumably profit share, I think you called it. So it's not just a salary, but I think that the idea that people won't work if they don't have commission is just nonsense. If you get certain types of people, it's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a different way, I think, is the thing I talk to people about, and I don't hear that from a lot of people. I think people think, recruitment is an out and out commission oriented environment. There is only one way to do it, and it's about which commission model you pick, rather than thinking, actually, maybe is there a different way to do this? And for us, and not to give away all of our secrets, right? It's a great selling point for us. I love speaking to our customers and explaining what us being no commission means and how that impacts.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
That's very interesting. I never considered that your clients would benefit from it as well, which seems stupid.
Massively so. When we used to do it, I used to say one of the biggest problems with recruiters, generally speaking, is they make decisions based on the end of the month money that they'll get. Those aren't necessarily the best decisions for you. If you take that out, they're making the best decisions for the client and for the candidate, and therefore the agency. And it's a different mentality, but it's one I believe in 100%. I do struggle sometimes to convince people to go down that route, pretty much every time, in fact. But I do think I'm with you, Alan, entirely on this. But only if you're organised in a certain way and hire people that share those values. So you couldn't just convert, someone watching this thinks, oh, great, I'll just do away with commission then. Awesome. I mean, if they did that and changed nothing else, their company would fold immediately, wouldn't it? I mean, it wouldn't function because it's not built like that. So it has to be the whole deal. We had this thing that we used to say, you treat your employees like partners, except less so. So whatever the partners got, everybody else got, but just less so. They all had shares. Certainly the senior people had unlimited holidays in those days. We had a share option, a profit share scheme, which was something that we got, and so they got, but a less version of. And I think that, and people were allowed to have a say and be included in the running of the business and the direction of the business, just like directors. And I think the more you can do that, the more you bring the right people in, and they stay with you, and you become a sticky employer.
So from a leadership point of view, you know, the final couple of things I'd say on it is I think, you know, occasionally some people out there in the external world would hear this no commission thing and think, oh, that's a great way for the owners of the business to earn more money. That just actually isn't the case. It's a way of being the type of business you want to be and providing the service and what you think recruitment should be, rather than just a way to keep more money. It's just actually not the case. And the second thing, just to go back to what I was saying about service to clients and stuff, Kirsty, you know, you'll talk. It can even be simple things like a salary negotiation. You know, I've heard plenty of our customers in the past say you're only trying to negotiate up the salary at offer stage because it gets you more money as an individual. But actually, we hear that's not the case, right? Because it changes nothing in terms of what that consultant earns relating to that placement. It's actually, we're negotiating the offer because that's what needs to happen in order to make that a successful outcome for everybody. That's
so interesting. Your integrity cannot be doubted around certain things because of the way you run it.
Yeah, certainly not from it takes away that financial gain.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, I could listen to you talking about this all day, Alan, but unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time now. Now, as always, in a second, I'm going to come to you and Mike, because he can't help himself, to find a top tip. People are watching this and they've been so enthralled. They just want, you've given lots of information. We want one thing, and I will come to you in a second. But before then, Mike, all of the people that we speak to on the program have lately been mentioning that their biggest problem is time and how they manage their time. And next time's show helps with this.
We have Julia Doherty's coming on the show, and Julia is a time management expert. She's very good at time management. She's going to come on and talk to us about how to manage our time more effectively. I, for one, I've asked her on the show, so I get some free consultancy, quite frankly, because damn, I need to know how to do that. So yeah, we're really looking forward to her coming on in 2 weeks' time.
It's going to be a fantastic show, and I know a lot of people who've been talking to me about that lately, so that's fantastic. But Alan, I'm coming to you now. So obviously, people have been watching this and they're thinking, right, either an MBA is the way to go, or, you know, that they want their team to be more stable, perhaps a combination of the two. So what would you say your top tip is for people to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, trying to pick one thing, I think I would just start with who you are and defining why you bother as a group, as a company, as an organization, as a collection of people. You know, why do you do what you do? What makes you who you are? And how is that embodied in the business? Because once you have that, so many other things then flow from that, and you have something to attach everything else to.
I'm a bit upset that Alan's chosen that, because I wanted to choose that for myself, because I think that's so important. But we're going to put a little link in the comments. I'd like you to watch it, a video of Leo Ferdinand Rio. That was again a test, see if you listen. Rio Ferdinand talking about culture at Manchester United when Ferguson was in charge. It's only 3 minutes long. Watch it. Seriously, it's awesome. So we'll put that on there, and it totally supports what Alan's just said there.
And I would say that this isn't just it's very important that this isn't just something that goes on your website and isn't just something that you define because you believe that's what you have to do. It's so much more than that, and there's lots of, you know, we could talk for another 45 minutes about how you do that, but it isn't just for the sake of it, which I think a lot of businesses might fall into the trap.
It's what you say when you're down the pub. It's what you say. Let me tell you why you should come and work for me, which was my opening gambit. Let me tell you, this is what we're going to do. These are the rules. Values are just rules. These are the values. This is how we're going to work, right? This is the strategy that we have. This is our culture. This is the kind of people that work here. Because if you don't like that, you need to clear off down the road, mate, because you're not going to do very well here if you do.
And we'll figure it out.
Alex Ferguson agrees with me. So
fantastic. Thank you very much, Alan. And Mike, because I'm feeling generous today, you get a top tip as well.
Okay. Mine is to do with that MBO. And if you're going to go down that route, get professional help. Get the thing valued and get someone to talk you through those steps to make sure that the mechanics of it are done properly, because not everybody is as honest and straightforward as Alan's previous owner. So I think it's important, and the other way around, of course, as well is true. If you're the owner, you want it to be done properly. So
I think it's less likely that people come out. You're more likely to come out with great relationships of everybody involved if you do something.
And the thing will be so much more successful if you do that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, fantastic. So, as always, we've come to the end of the show today. First of all, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you so much. I know it's the school holidays, so thank you very much for being here. I want to thank Alan for being so open, so honest, and so helpful and informative today. Thank you so much for being here today, Alan.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me on.
Very welcome. And of course, I should thank Mike, shouldn't I? He's on his hollybobs and he came to do this today, didn't you, Mike? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to it, and it lived up to everything I expected. Thank you, Alan.
Fantastic. So thank you very much. Have a lovely Easter, hopefully, and we will see you in a couple of weeks about time management.